Much like life itself, it's important to make a good first impression. If you don't, you can ruin any hope of being accepted by whoever it is you're being introduced to. For example, if the first time you heard my voice I directly called you a schmerl, I imagine it's going to take me a while to get back in your good books. You don't even know what schmerl is, and you'll probably just decide to hate me forever. This is even tougher in wrestling because the crowd can be so vicious. If you turn up with a bad gimmick or say something dumb, they will jump on your back and eat you alive. Then it's very difficult to get back to where you need to be, and if it's too awful, you may just vanish from existence entirely. Then there are some performers who had to overcome incredible hurdles just to get back in the ring to start with. I'm Simon from WhatCulture, and this is 10 wrestlers whose careers started in the worst possible way. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to stay notified. Ding, ding, done. Number 10, Elias. The crazy thing about Elias is that Triple H was right. The game very early on decided that while the Drifter may struggle within NXT, he'd probably blossom once he got called up to the main roster, and that's exactly what happened. When he was down in developmental, the fans still hated him, but not for the right reasons. They just wanted him to go away. Refusing to buy into his shtick, the audience would basically start moaning as soon as his segment started and wouldn't even give his matches a chance. As far as they were concerned, he was dead before he begun. And weren't they wrong? Actually benefiting from WWE's insistence of not referencing NXT when performers make the leap to Raw or SmackDown, Elias was able to start anew, and it only took a few months before he was a proper heel, getting jeered for all the right reasons. He got under people's skin. Today he's one of the highlights of most Raws, proving that you should never give up and always believe in yourself. Good for you, Elias. Good for you. Number 9, Daniel Puder. Poor Daniel Puder, not understanding that trying to impress people outside of what you've been told to do is not what WWE wants to see, he rocked up on Tough Enough and made this most grave of errors. Happening in November 2004, it all took place during an unscripted segment with Kurt Angle. After winning the chance to scrap with the Olympian, Puder used his MMA training to lock Angle in a Kimura and then put him in a position where he would have to tap out. Thanks to the fast-thinking ref that night, he saw Angle roll Puder's shoulders onto the mat, so just counted to 3 to let him off the leash. As you can imagine, this neither pleased Angle nor any of the veterans in the back who saw the plucky upstart as disrespectful. It resulted in them beating the man senseless at the Royal Rumble in 2005, and a few months later Puder had been released. And to think if he had just laid down for Kurt, none of this would have happened. Wrestling is so weird. Number 8, Enzo Amore. A man who seemed to wind people up long after his first impression was over, Enzo Amore was just a heat beacon. If he could annoy somebody, he would, and numerous stories of being kicked off buses and whatnot were quite commonplace. According to Simon Gotch, however, Enzo was already having people raise eyebrows as he was training to be a wrestler. Why, you may ask? Well, according to the former vaudevillain, Amore once broke his leg doing a wrist lock. Enzo said it was due to a loose canvas, and for all I know that could be true, but you can see why some more experienced talent may have been worried about getting in the ring with him. It was the talk of the locker room for a while, and eventually caught up with Enzo as he was controversially let go earlier in 2018. Number 7, Dolph Ziggler. It may sound crazy today, but the first time Dolph Ziggler was introduced to the WWE Universe was as a caddy for Kerwin White, and then as Nikki from the Spirit Squad. I mean, it genuinely is incredible he's managed to weather both those storms, and probably a window into how good he is between those ropes. Even if the gimmick could have worked, which is dubious, they were booked to oblivion anyway, the hammer coming when DX threw the whole group in a box and sent it off to OVW, or WWE's developmental territory at the time. Way to tell your audience somebody sucks. No one here was able to salvage this aside from Ziggler after he returned from a hire with a new gimmick. Even then he was handed a stupid character that would go around and introduce himself to even one, but he persevered. It's a credit to Dolph's staying power and even more evidence that at some point he should probably be given a proper push to make up for all this nonsense. Number 6, Luke Gallows. Another man that had to go through the ringer before coming out the other side. The first time you saw Luke Gallows on WWE TV, you probably had no idea. This was because he was cast as the fake Kane. That just disappeared from nowhere one day, as did Gallows, until he came back in May 2007. And in many ways, this was even worse. Bordering on the offensive, Festus, as he was known, was, as far as I can tell, a mentally challenged individual before the bell rang, and when it did, he transformed into some aggressive brute. Somehow this lasted to 2009, even though no one ever understood it, and it wasn't until he joined the Straight Edge Society where he was able to show what he could actually do. Even then, WWE wasn't overly keen on him and he got released, moving to Japan, where he absolutely tore it up. He did so well he got rehired in 2016, and from that point on, he's been part of the Good Brothers. Amazingly too, even with all this, he's still only 34 years old. Number 5, Kevin Nash. Given how important Kevin Nash has been to the wrestling industry for many reasons, it's perplexing that when he first debuted, he was treated like a doofus. Arriving as one half of the Master Blasters in WCW during the 90s, his run here wasn't that long. This is because someone backstage had the great idea to transform him into Oz, a character based on the movies of the same name. Who on earth thought that would work? What's even worse was the clothes he was forced to wear, and he looked ridiculous. No one has ever been more green, and he had to wear a stupid beard. You'll be shocked to hear 2 months later, this had been abandoned. A rebranding as Vinny Vegas was good enough to get the WWE's attention, and after a request from Shawn Michaels, he made the jump in 1993. A long, successful career followed, and while Nash will always be divisive, it's hard to say he didn't take the industry by the horns and kind of make it his own. Number 4, Kazuchika Okada. How on earth can one of the greatest wrestlers ever be in this list? The answer, of course, is TNA. These were dark times indeed. Sent to America to try and work on his skills and find himself, TNA decided to job him out constantly, most on their B show known as Explosion. Then in 2011, they renamed him Akato, a persona inspired by the Green Hornet. The hell? Before the year was up, Okada had left TNA, citing his treatment as the main reason, and few people could blame him. How TNA missed the talent that was staring them in the face is anybody's guess. Probably because of this, when he returned to New Japan, he struggled to find his feet again before, thankfully, he went on one of the best runs in the history of the company. Just think what could have been, TNA. This was bonkers. Number 3, Edge. As we know now, Edge has gone on to become a WWE Hall of Famer and a worthy one to boot. He had classic matches with an array of opponents, and his forced retirement was met by genuine sadness. He earned everybody's respect and adulation. Unfortunately, his first impression on the company left a lot of people worried about what management had brought in. Although he had worked plenty of dark matches, when he had his first televised bout against Jose Estrada Jr. on Raw, the Rated R superstar injured his opponent's neck. It was an accident, of course, when Edge caught Estrada's head, but let's face it, if that happens on day one, a lot of your peers are going to assume the worst. Thankfully, the injury wasn't as bad as was first feared, and before long the Canadian showed everyone just how good he could be. Number 2, Ric Flair. A bit of a different one this, but it definitely fits into the whole worst possible way thing, especially when you consider what could have happened to Ric Flair in 1975 when he was involved in a plane crash. A horrific incident that saw Johnny Valentine paralyzed. The Nature Boy also broke his back in 3 places and was told by doctors his wrestling career was probably over before it ever began. Knowing what we know now, this seems almost ridiculous, but in true Flair fashion, he battled back through a crazy rehab schedule to return to the ring just 4 months later. It was also what forced Rick to change his in-ring style and lose a bunch of weight, and while no one in their right mind would ever want to be in a wreck of this sort, it did refocus him as he rose to the top. By 1978, he was the Nature Boy officially, and he'd go on to rewrite history. Number 1, The Rock. When The Rock saved Roman Reigns at the Royal Rumble 2015 and got booed out of the place, he probably had flashbacks to debuting at the 1996 Survivor Series when everything just went wrong. Arriving on the scene as Rocky Maivia, the character was out of touch almost instantly, and his over-the-top goody two-shoes act fooled no one. A few months after he walked in the door, fans were telling him to die and that he sucked. WWE had not only failed at getting him over, but also getting the fans to care in any sense. Thankfully, his salvation came in the form of a heel turn. Joining the Nation of Domination as The Rock, he was able to use this hatred to his advantage and become one of the most successful performers in modern WWE. He would continually evolve before ending up in Hollywood, and all of this was after making the worst first impression possible. It truly is one of the most amazing rises you could ever hope to witness.